Hey, did you know that 97% of couples who build a home together end up getting divorced? And oddly enough, it's the same correlation with those who try to build IKEA furniture together. They all end up divorced. I'm Jeff Packer, team leader and broker owner of the Packer Group. And hey, we are dedicated to delivering great content to our clients to help them with their real estate needs. And the mystery of new construction is something that, hey, we can unravel for you. And so let's talk right now about the 10 things you need to know so that you can end up like the 3% who don't get divorced at the end of the process. Yes, that statistic was fake. All right, so let's dive in to the top 10 things you need to know. But before I do that, I want you to know we are making this a two-part video because there is so much content for us to talk through that we wanna make sure that you're able to get it all. The first video, we're gonna be talking a lot about the financing, the money, things like that. The second part, we're gonna be talking a lot about areas, location, and things to consider. So please stay tuned for next week's episode to get part 2. So let's start with part 1. Types of builders. This is tip number 1 that you need to know is the types of builders. There's 3 main types of builders when it comes to new construction. Your production builder, your semi-custom builder, and your custom builder. So production builders are kind of, just to give you an example, like the Pulte's, the Lombardos, the MI Homes. These are companies that go in, buy large tracts of land, develop it all, lay out all the different sites, and then you come in and you pick from 6 models and maybe 4 different elevations with each model, et cetera, et cetera. But it's all production built homes. They can be built faster, which is an advantage, but those are some of the things with the production build. Then there's semi-custom. Semi-custom builders are like Toll Brothers or Cranbrook, things like that, where basically they still, again, at the end of the day, have a floor plan and all that stuff for you guys to pick out. They've already developed the land, things like that. And but they just have a lot more design features that you can alter and change, maybe even layout, stuff like that, which makes them semi-custom. Great for a high-end income earner family that is looking for a unique property. And then you've got your custom builders. These are the builders that specialize in, you go and buy the land and maybe you want 2 acres, maybe you want 20, and then they come in and they build exactly the floor plan you want with all the changes and things like that. So there's pros and cons to all of those different approaches, but those are the 3 types of builders that you're going to come across when it comes to building a new home. So second thing you need to know is there's a big misconception that like, hey, if you go and build a home, there's no real estate agent involved. You just go to the sales office and begin the process. Yes, you can do that, but there are lots of dangers, like buyer beware is a very important process or phrase when it comes to that process. Almost every builder that we've come in contact with will absolutely work with a client who has a realtor representing them. Now, you might think, well, but if the realtor, myself, is representing you, there's a cost to you. No, the builder pays our commission. And so that's an important thing for you to understand. Now, then you might be thinking, well, if I bring you into the fold and they've now got to pay you, am I not gonna get as good of a deal? So I can't say definitively on this because at the end of the day, not everybody's the same, but a majority of builders out there already have baked into their pricing model the commission that they would pay a realtor for bringing them a buyer. And so your best bet is to use a realtor, somebody who can advocate for you and fight for you and help you know what you don't know. So just to reiterate that point a bit more, I personally built my home with a builder 6 years ago. And in getting to know a lot of my neighbors post that process, many of them had communicated that they didn't know that they could have changed this in the build process. They didn't know that these other options were available to them, or they didn't know that when something went wrong, they could have pushed back with a private home inspector or somebody like that to fix and correct the issues that are there. And so I just can't stress enough that having a realtor involved in the transaction, and not just any realtor, a really, really good realtor who's been there and done that and has the experience, knows that there are certain things they can push back on to help protect you better. There's contract issues within the contract language. There's potential expectations that you may have, that the builder has different expectations, and being able to navigate that with somebody who knows and can advocate for you, I can't stress how important that is. Number 3, this is the financing aspect of building. And it can be very confusing, and there's no way I'm gonna be able to cover everything you need to know in this quick little update on this. But just know that if you're building with like a production builder, the financing is just very similar to how you would go and buy an existing home. There's an appraisal that would need to get done. And then when you close on the home is when the loan begins and you make payments like you normally would. No real major difference. The biggest thing you have to navigate through on that end is a long-term rate lock, because by the time you sign with the builder to the time they're done building the product, it could be 6 to 18 months. And so you would, at some point along that 6 to 18 months, lock in an interest rate, and it could be a long-term rate. Like a lot of lenders now are doing like a 12-month rate lock where you can lock into a lower rate. And that's especially important right now because rates have recently gone quite a bit higher. And we saw that where when rates went quite a bit higher, if people hadn't locked in their rate, they would have maybe been in a situation where they couldn't afford that new home that they had spent all this time working with the builder to build, and the deals were falling apart. And so there's a lot around that, but just know having a realtor who understands this is important in this process. The second type of financing is what we call construction loan. This is more where you own the land and you're hiring a builder to build on that land, and you close on the loan right away. Once you guys agree to purchase the property and you go through the mortgage process, you would close on the loan very quickly, but it would be an interest-only loan that the builder takes draws throughout the process, and that increases then the principal balance, and you're paying interest on that principal balance until the house is complete. Once the house is complete, you have a new closing that basically is then a new loan that pays off the construction loan and turns into a 15, 20, or 30-year mortgage, whatever you decided to do with your lender. And so again, lots of moving parts to that. I'm not gonna be able to get into all the granulars with it, but just understand those are your primary 2 ways to purchase new construction, unless you're obviously self-financed and you're paying cash. So it's either the traditional mortgage approach with a production built home, or you're looking at usually a construction loan if you're doing a custom built home, and or there's some smaller builders who won't finance the build for you through the process. Those smaller builders will expect you to do a construction loan and be paying that interest through the loan, through the build process. So just understand those things. Fourth thing you need to know is deposits. How do the deposits work? And so again, this all depends on if you're building with a production builder or a custom builder. And there's lots of differences in between there, and every builder is a little bit different. But I'm just gonna give you the general framework, but just understand, every builder is gonna have a different framework in which that you would work off of. So generally speaking, there's an initial deposit to reserve your lot. That's like step 1. So somebody comes to me, finds a new build that they want to be able to build on, mostly a production built home. We would go into the sales office and we'd say, hey, we would like this particular lot, and we would put like a small, like $1,000, $2,000, maybe upwards to $5,000 deposit down on the lot. That reserves it for you so nobody else can come swooping in and grab it. But then they would put a timeline in which you would need to then get to the point where you're signing an actual contract with them to build. So then that's where the next deposit usually comes in, is that you'd have another deposit at the time that you sign a contract. That's where you've picked what house you want to build on it, a lot of the structural changes that, if any, that they would allow you to make, and what type of, in the lot, obviously, that you're building on would all be linked around that contract, and you pay another deposit. And then depending on the builder, you might have another deposit at another portion, like maybe once they get to framing of the house, or once they get to like, certain selections within the house. And the more custom you make something, especially with a semi-custom builder and or even a production builder, the more custom and ornate that you would design and make selections in that home, the builder might want to curb their risk in case the deal falls apart and cause you to make more deposits than normal, just because you maybe picked like a really bizarre tile that you want throughout the whole house, that they know that if they take this house back into inventory because you can't close on it, they know they would have a problem getting that home sold, and that they might actually have to rip all that tile out and put something more generally appropriate for the general public in. And so deposits can be interesting depending on the type of builder that you have, but this is again where having a real estate agent navigate that for you is really helpful. Now, if you were to do a custom home with a custom builder, oftentimes you've already purchased the lot. And so then the deposit structure would be different, because again, if you're getting a construction loan and you're making interest-only payments on the draws, there may be less of a need for deposits out of pocket up front. Fifth thing you need to know, and the last thing for part one of this video, is inspections. What sort of inspections, if any, should you get during the build process? Well, let me tell you. Yes, you're going to have the city or municipality, township or city that's the property is being built in, will have a building inspector, and they will come in and make sure that things are being built to code. That's important. That's already gonna happen. If the property involves like something that the county oversees, like say the well and septic, then the county will also be involved and make sure that those things are being done to code for the county. However, who's protecting things to make sure not just that minimally they're being done to code, but they're being done to a higher level of expectation, to your expectation as the buyer? Well, nobody, unless you hire somebody. And nobody encourages this to be done, hardly at all. Even other real estate agents. I know a lot of real estate agents that do not proactively encourage this. We would encourage that you get 3 inspections additionally done during the process, and you would pay a little more for this, but you would have somebody then now representing what is best for you. So we would recommend a private home inspector, which we have several that we refer out, but a private home inspector that can check the property at the time that the basement is poured, so the poured foundation. The second would be at framing, so the house has been framed, roofed, windows put in. Before they've put in, before they start drywalling it, they've already had the plumbing put in, the electrical put in, roofs on, windows on, everything's pretty much done, but they haven't drywalled it yet. We would highly recommend an inspection to be done at that time. And then the third would be at the end of the build. So just about a week or 2 before you close on the home, because this could help you with your final punch list to be able to then help provide to the builder so that the house is finished and turned over to you in as best of a shape as possible for your expectations. This all helps with bettering your experience. And this would be the conclusion of part one, our first part of the 10 things you need to know when it comes to home building and new construction in Metro Detroit. So thanks for listening to part one. Here's the deal. We've got a lot of resources that we'll put in the description of the video, because there's just so much that we could give you when it comes to new construction, because again, there's just a lot of misinformation out there. Stay tuned for part 2 next week. We will be discussing a lot when it comes to expectations, location, and some things that you may want to consider when it comes to figuring out if new construction's right for you. So thanks for watching. And as always, we just want to help you remember that Michigan is home to one of only 4 ice luge tracks in all of the United States.